All right, everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Bankroll. I'm your host, Robert Banker. Thank you so much for checking this out. It's episode 4, and we're talking tight ends. We're going to look back and see how 2024 ended. We're going to look and see if there's any rookies worth paying attention to for your fantasy drafts. We'll talk scoring tiers, and we'll get into way too early rankings. But first, as we always do, let's take a quick look back and see how 2024 ended. Let's go. All right, let's talk tight end surprises. And you can't talk tight end surprises from last season and not mention last year's amazing rookie Brock Bowers. Even for a rookie, Bowers had a relatively high ADP of tight end 12 last season, which comes with an expected score of 137.2 over the past 5 seasons. And he blew that out of the water, scoring 262.7 points last season, catching 112 balls, which was third best in the league overall. And now with Ashton Genty in Las Vegas to help take some pressure off him, he should be in line for another great season in 2025. He'll definitely be one of the top 2 tight ends taken in most fantasy drafts this year. And you'll have to check back later on my way too early tight end rankings to see where I have him ranked for the 2025 season. Spoiler, it's not 2. Another tight end surprise you have to mention from last season was a guy who had an ADP of 31 going into last season, which was behind his own teammate, Ben Sinnott. And although Zach Ertz turned 34 during the season, for most of the year he looked 24 again, catching passes from Jaden Daniels and finishing as tight end 7 on the year, pulling in 66 passes for 654 yards and 7 touchdowns. He should still be a solid option for the Commanders, but I'm not sure he's able to replicate that type of production again this year, making it hard to draft him anywhere other than as a late-round flyer in deeper leagues. But last season was great to see from the vet. The last tight end surprise I want to talk about from last season was tight end 38 going into last year, which was 21 places lower than his teammate Luke Musgrave. And despite that, Tucker Kraft finished last season as tight end 10, hauling in 50 passes for 770 yards and 7 touchdowns from Jordan Love. The Packers did add some more talent in this year's draft, but last year Kraft showed he can produce with a low target share, getting only 14.4% of Love's passes. And going into his 3rd season working with Love and building trust together, he should have another good season in 2025. All right, now let's talk about some of the fantasy disappointments from last season. Kyle Pitts has been fighting the bust label since his rookie season, which was coincidentally his best as a pro, being the only time he's gotten over 100 targets and over 1,000 yards in a season. Last year was his lowest yardage in a season, other than when he was injured in 2022 and only played in 10 games. He's been mentioned in trade talks for the past 2 off seasons now, so we'll see if anything happens there or if it affects his play in any way. If there was one bright spot from last season, it's that his touchdowns were the highest of his career, with 4. Which I know isn't a crazy high total, but when it comes to Pitts, any progress is good progress. Going into 2025, I currently have him ranked just outside the top 15 as my tight end 16 in my way too early rankings that we'll be taking a look at later in the show. After having a really solid rookie season, pulling in 80% of the passes thrown his way, to the tune of 73 catches for 673 yards, Dalton Kincaid was tapped as tight end 5 heading into last season. His catch percentage plummeted to below 60% last year, before dealing with some injuries, missing 4 games, and scoring 100.8 points for the season, finishing as tight end 29. Josh Allen had almost 100 less pass attempts last season than he's averaged as a starter, so I'd expect that number to go back up some, and some of those passes to go Kincaid's way. And a lot of his fantasy impact this season will depend on what he does with the targets he gets. And I'd expect a much better finish this season. Make sure you stick around to see where I have him ranked in my way too early rankings. Coming off a 71 catch, 760 yard and 5 touchdown season, Jake Ferguson had an ADP of tight end 9 last season, but ended up with only 59 catches for 494 yards and nada in the touchdown department, finishing as tight end 25, scoring 104.4 points, which if you compare to the expected points from my tight end scoring tier list, is 60 points less than expected, putting him more in the tier 5 category, which has an average of 103 points. His yards per target and yards per reception were all down, and that could have been the product of playing with multiple quarterbacks last season, but it's never something you want to see as a fantasy GM. He still had a top 15 target share percentage at 17.2%, and he's only 26 going into his 4th season. So if Dak is healthy all year, he should have a much better 2025 season than he did in 2024. All right, stop me if you've heard me say this, but ADP matters in the letdown game. And stop me if you've heard this. Evan Engram missed some games last season due to injury. 8 of them to be exact. I know injuries are an unfortunate part of the game, and while his first 2 seasons in Jacksonville were injury-free, when you combine last season with his time in New York, it's caused him to go on my list, which is the list of people that come draft time are going to cause me to hesitate every time. Not that I won't pick them, but I'll have to convince myself that their situation's better. Engram has shown he can produce as a top 5 tight end. He'll just have to stay healthy. And the Broncos, Engram, and fantasy GMs everywhere will be hoping for the same. You have to stick around and see where I have him ranked in my way too early tight end rankings. Can he come off my list this season? All right, that was a quick look back at how the Titans finished up the 2024 season. There's a lot of young guns creeping up the rankings, and we'll have to see where they're at in my way too early rankings later in the show. But next I wanted to take a look at my tight end scoring tier guide. It's a draft tool I've been going over in each episode. Let's check it out. Alright, here's my tight end scoring tier list. And just a quick recap in case you missed the first couple episodes. Each tier is grouped into 5 players, and those players' spots are determined by where they finish ranked at the end of the season. So tier 1 will be tight ends 1 through 5, tier 2 will be tight ends 6 through 10, and so on. And to try to get a more accurate data set, I've used the stats for the previous 5 seasons to calculate the totals. And when I started looking at the tight end scoring tiers, the biggest thing I noticed is that the 5-year scoring average differential for tiers 2 and 3 is 21.80. But if you break that down and look a little closer for the past 2 years, you've seen a larger point differential from tier 2 to tier 3 than in previous years. From 2020 to 2022, the average point difference was 12 points from tier 2 to tier 3. But over the past 2 seasons, that point difference has jumped to 37 points, meaning that the second tier of tight ends has been producing more than they have in past seasons, which is a good sign if you do miss out on the top tier of tight ends. Again, these tier lists are guides to help you during your fantasy drafts to see what points you can expect historically from certain players and positions depending upon where they're ranked. Okay, that was the tight end scoring tiers. We've gone through all the scoring tier lists that matter. Sorry, kickers. So once I finish up the review series, I'll post a quick episode doing a more in-depth look on how you can use those scoring tier lists together during your fantasy drafts. But first, let's take a look at the incoming rookie tight ends and see if there's any that should be on your fantasy radar this season. Let's check them out. Colston Loveland was the top tight end taken this year's NFL draft. And there's no denying he's incredibly talented. But he is coming into an offense with an established starter at the position in Cole Kmet, young pieces around him on offense ready to steal targets, and he's only a rookie. So he's going to have a little bit of an uphill battle to be fantasy relevant early in the season. Kmet has been a very solid tight end, but last season his stats were the lowest they've been in 3 years. I think Loveland's too talented not to see the field, even if he starts the year as tight end too. And I wouldn't be surprised if he takes over the top spot by the end of the season. But with so many proverbial mouths to feed, it's going to take Loveland really showing out in training camp to work his way into being a big part of the offense early in Chicago. And for what it's worth, I do have Loveland ranked higher than Kmet in my way too early 2025 tight end fantasy rankings we'll be taking a look at later in the show. Tyler Warren should start the season as the top tight end for the Colts, which is usually a good thing in fantasy. But the question is, who will be throwing Warren the ball this season? Anthony Richardson hasn't shown that he can be an accurate passer or stay healthy during his 2 seasons in the league. And he'll be fighting with Daniel Jones for the top quarterback spot. This is the same Daniel Jones that was jettisoned from a 3-win Giants team last season. So needless to say, the options aren't the best at the quarterback position for the Colts going into this season. Personally, I think it would be best for Warren if Jones wins the starting spot, and he can recreate some of the magic he did his rookie year, which was his best in the league. Everyone's most likely heard that Mason Taylor is the son of former Miami Dolphin great Jason Taylor. But if you haven't yet, I've satisfied that trivia nugget that I'm sure will follow him for his entire career. Taylor will have a chance to make a name for himself early in his career, as he should be in line to start the season atop the depth chart. And with Justin Fields taking over under center, you know who they say is a quarterback's best friend. Well, other than a good running game, good tackles, a white slot receiver, and good play calling. And that's a tight end. And Fields has shown he's comfortable targeting tight ends in the past. One NFL offensive coordinator said Taylor was, and I quote this, fucking awesome, and the second best tight end in the draft behind Colston Loveland. New Jets offensive coordinator Tanner Engram should have fun finding ways to use Taylor to get the most out of him during his rookie season. I have Taylor ranked just outside my top 25 fantasy tight ends, but that's mainly due to the fact that I'm not sure how the offense will look with so many new and young pieces. At this point, he's just a late round option. But come August, Taylor could be one of the risers in my final rankings. 4 picks after the Jets took Taylor, the Los Angeles Rams selected Terrence Ferguson. And he could even be a potential sleeper target at the tight end position this year. I say that because Tyler Higbee is going into his 10th year in the league and is a season removed from tearing his ACL and MCL, playing in only 3 games last season. The tight end position has been one of Matthew Stafford's favorite targets, especially during his time in Los Angeles. And I can see Ferguson finishing the season in the 40 to 50 target range for around 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. I currently have him ranked just outside the top 25 in my way too early rankings and as a late round target at this point, but someone to definitely keep an eye on because he's one Tyler Higbee injury away from a starting role. Elijah Arroyo was the last tight end picked in the second round, and he's going into a good situation in Seattle. Noah Fant has been the starter for the past 3 years, but he's coming off the worst 2 seasons of his career, scoring only 1 touchdown over the past 2 years combined. And he's been openly discussed in trade talks since last season, which never helps the confidence. And while Arroyo is only a rookie, he and Fant will both have the same amount of time working with new quarterback Sam Darnold going into camp. And 3 of Darnold's top 7 targets last season were tight ends. So if Arroyo can show he's reliable during training camp, I see him in the 40 to 50 target, 300 to 400 yards, and 2 to 3 touchdown range. He could be a mid to late round target. The Cleveland Browns selected Harold Fannin Jr. with the 3rd pick in the 3rd round, and he should definitely see some playing time this year as the number 2 tight end behind David Njoku for the Cleveland Browns, as they'll be looking to replace the 38% of the snaps that Jordan Akins took as tight end 2 last season. Not to mention the fact that Njoku has missed at least 3 games or more in 4 of the last 6 seasons, which could lead to Fannin Jr. potentially even starting a few games this season. He's another guy I see in the 40 to 50 target range for about 350 to 450 yards and between 2 to 3 touchdowns for the season. Cleveland's offense shouldn't be the best, so Fannin Jr. should only be a target if there's an unfortunate injury to David Njoku this season. The only tight end selected in the 4th round was Gunnar Helm, going to the Tennessee Titans. He'll most likely start the season behind Josh Whyle as tight end 2, but Whyle hasn't shown much in his first 2 seasons, and with such a young team, they could see what Helm has to offer by getting him in the mix sooner rather than later. His performance during training camp could be something to monitor come August, but my guess is that he's seeing tight end 2 snaps by the end of the year. But as it currently stands in June, he's not someone you should be targeting during your fantasy drafts. With the 27th pick in the 5th round, the Carolina Panthers selected Mitchell Evans, and he'll be in a young but talented tight end room in Carolina. He'll most likely start the season 3rd on the depth chart behind Jatavion Sanders and fellow Golden Domer Tommy Tremble, and unless something changes due to unforeseen circumstances, he's not someone you should be targeting during your fantasy drafts this season. 2 picks after Evans, the Los Angeles Chargers selected Oronde Gadsden II out of Syracuse. He'll join a Chargers tight end room loaded with some veteran talent in Will Dissly and Tyler Conklin, which should hopefully help ease him into things during his rookie season. The Chargers are in a good position to allow Gadsden to learn some of the ins and outs of the offense and what it takes to be an NFL tight end. And with Conklin only on a 1-year deal, Gadsden should be positioned for a much larger role in the offense next season. But until then, he shouldn't be someone you're targeting during your fantasy drafts. All right, rounding out our top 10, we've got Jackson Hawes with the Buffalo Bills. With Dawson Knox going into his age 30 season and essentially on the last year of his contract, the Jackson Hawes pick is one of those picks that looks to be more about the future, as the team hopes the rookie out of Georgia Tech will be able to pick up the offense this season while learning behind Knox and Dalton Kincaid before hopefully ascending into the tight end 2 position next year. So while maybe next year we'll be discussing Hawes' fantasy draft stock more, this season you can avoid him in your fantasy drafts. All right, that was the rookies. There's definitely some talented and dynamic players coming into the league at the tight end position. Who do you think surprises this year? Can any of the young guys crack the top 10? Let me know what you think in the comments. Now let's get into our final segment, and that's my way too early tight end rankings for the 2025 season. Let's check them out. Number 15, Dallas Goedert. The bad news for Goedert is that he finished last season as tight end 27, pulling in 42 passes for 496 yards and 2 touchdowns. The good news for Goedert? He finished last season as tight end 27, and he did so despite missing 7 games. The only player to finish in the top 30 without playing in at least 13 games. Now hopefully the injuries haven't taken a toll on him long term, because he's still very talented and can be a fantasy weapon when he's on the field. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Goedert has been solid in his 7 years in the league, averaging 50 receptions, 584 yards, and 4 touchdowns per season. But the only time he's played in every game in a season was his rookie year, averaging just 13 games played a season. Last season, his catch percentage was the highest of his career at over 80%, which means he's turning his targets into catches. But for it to make more of an impact, he'll need to play in more than the 10 games he did last season. There have been some trade talks around Goedert the past couple of seasons, and he'll turn 30 this year. So he'll be looking to show he can still make plays on offense, whether it's in Philadelphia or not. Number 14, Cade Otton. Last season was Otton's 3rd in the league, and he's improved statistically every year, pulling in 59 passes for 600 yards and 4 touchdowns last season, playing in 75% of the Bucs' offensive snaps. In an offense that features a lot of talented players, he received a 19% target share last season. Combine that with the fact that he's going to be on the field for 3/4 of the team's plays, and it bodes well for his chances to continue his upward trajectory going into 2025. But let's take a look at his 3-year averages. Otton's averages during his 3 years have been 49 catches, 482 yards, and 3 touchdowns per season. However, as I mentioned, those numbers have been getting better every year. And the fact that he's in one of the NFL's top 5 passing offenses doesn't hurt his chances to increase those numbers even more during the 2025 season. And while he might not be in the top tier of tight ends yet, if he continues to improve as he has, he could be knocking on the door this season. Number 13, Jake Ferguson. Alright, coming off his second season in which he finished as tight end 9, last year was a bit of a letdown for Ferguson. He finished with 59 catches for 494 yards, and he didn't find the end zone at all, finishing as tight end 25. Now, he did deal with some injuries throughout the year, as well as to his quarterback, and when Dak was healthy, he had 3 of his 4 best scoring performances of the year. However, when you're going into the year as a top 10 fantasy ranked tight end, a tight end 25 finish just isn't going to cut it. But let's take a look and see what the averages he's given you since he took over in Dallas. Since taking over the top tight end spot in Dallas in 2023, he's averaged 65 receptions, 628 yards, and 3 touchdowns per season. He did still pull in a target share of 17.2% last season, which was good enough for a finish in the top 15. But his yards per reception and yards per target were both down from 2023, and it really affected his overall numbers. You know what else affected him? Inconsistent quarterback play. So if he gets a healthy Dak throwing him the ball in 2025, Ferguson should show once again why he was a top 10 fantasy tight end in 2023. Number 12, Tucker Kraft. In only his second year, Kraft enjoyed a breakout sophomore season, finishing as you saw as tight end 10, hauling in 50 passes for 707 yards and 7 touchdowns. Green Bay was just middle of the pack offensively, and if they can take a step forward in the 2025 season, it could have a positive impact on Kraft in the stat department. And speaking of stats, let's take a look and see what he's given you for his 2 years.
Here's Love to the end zone, diving catch!
Bullock was coming from the other side.
Obviously, last season was better statistically than his rookie year, but for his 2 years, he's averaged 41 catches, 531 yards, and 5 touchdowns per season. Kraft produced top 10 fantasy stats last season, despite only having a target share of 14.4%. The good news is that Kraft also saw over 85% of the offensive snaps for the Packers last season. And if he continues being on the field for that many snaps and can increase his target share by even a few more percentage points, he could finish even higher for your fantasy team this upcoming season. Number 11, Dalton Kincaid. After enjoying a solid rookie season in which he played in over 60% of the Bills' offensive snaps, Kincaid was ranked as tight end 5 going into last season. But he dealt with some injuries and caused his numbers to dip a little bit, playing in only 43% of the snaps last season, finishing with 44 catches for 448 yards and 2 touchdowns, ranking as tight end 29, which was a huge letdown for fantasy GMs. Now, it has only been 2 years, but let's take a look and see what you've got from him. As I already mentioned, his rookie season was better statistically. But if you look at his 2 seasons combined, he's turned in an average of 59 catches, 561 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Which isn't bad at all, but obviously as a fantasy GM, you're expecting a healthy Kincaid to get you closer to, if not better stats, than what we saw during his rookie season, when he finished as tight end 11. He went from catching over 80% of his passes his rookie year to less than 60% last season, so even a slight bounce back in that category would help. I think the Bills find more ways to get the ball to Kincaid this season, and his numbers look more like they did his rookie year. Number 10, Mark Andrews.
And that's his 48th career touchdown, breaking a tie with Jamal Lewis.
After finishing the 2023 season on IR, 2024 was more like what we've come to expect from Andrews during his 7-year career. He pulled in 55 catches for 673 yards and 11 touchdowns. Those 11 touchdowns were the most of his career. And during that career, what have fantasy GMs been able to expect from Andrews? Let's check it out. Andrews has been an elite tight end since his second season, finishing 5th, 6th, 1st, 4th, 14th in an injury-shortened season before finishing 6th last season. He's averaged 63 catches per season, 790 yards, and 7 touchdowns, which are numbers that every fantasy GM will take from their tight ends. He does have Isaiah Likely pushing for some of his targets, but he still was seeing 61% of the snaps and 14.4% of the targets last season. Going into this season fully healthy, I'd expect similar numbers to what we've seen from Andrews in the past. Number 9, Jonnu Smith. Going into Miami last year, Smith was joining his third team in 3 seasons, but year 8 was easily the best of his career. And fittingly enough, his stats were chock full of 8s. He pulled in 88 catches for 884 yards and 8 touchdowns, finishing as tight end 4 on the season. Now let's break down his career stats a little bit more. For his career, Smith had an average of 38 receptions, 413 yards, and 3 touchdowns per season. But it's been a tale of 2 careers for Smith. The first being his first 6 seasons in the league, where he averaged 28 catches, 306 yards, and 3 touchdowns per season while in Tennessee and New England. And then there's his last 2 seasons, which have looked much better in terms of the stat line, with an average of 69 catches, 733 yards, and 6 touchdowns per season. There's been recent trade talks involving Smith, so we'll have to see how that ends up. And if he is traded, what offense he ends up in. But if he's still in Miami next season, there's no reason to think that he can't continue to produce like he has the last 2 seasons. Number 8, Evan Engram. Ingram's had a solid career despite dealing with shaky quarterback play and some injuries. And last season was a microcosm of this. In the weeks he played, he was a top 15 scoring tight end, despite playing with the backup quarterback most of the time, pulling in 47 passes for 365 yards and 1 touchdown. But he missed 3 games early with a hamstring injury, and he went on IR after being injured in Week 14, ending his season, and ultimately his time with the Jaguars. Now let's see what fantasy GMs can expect from Engram in his first season with the Broncos. Engram burst onto the scene his rookie season in New York, finishing the year as tight end 5. But he's dealt with a series of injuries that have affected his production. Despite that, he's had a solid average during his career, pulling in 62 receptions for 615 yards and 3 touchdowns per season. You saw a glimpse of what he can be during the 2023 season in Jacksonville, when he played in every game and turned in 114 catches for 963 yards and 4 touchdowns. Going into his 9th year, this is a big season for Engram to prove that he can stay healthy and produce at a high level. And the Broncos will be hoping that's what they're getting from Engram this season, as will every fantasy GM who picks him. Number 7, Travis Kelce. Kelce's 2024 stats weren't bad by any stretch. He pulled in 97 catches, 4th most of his career, for 823 yards and 3 touchdowns, finishing as tight end 5. But those aren't the kind of numbers we've come to expect from the Canton-bound tight end. His yards, touchdowns, yards per route, per target, and per game were all the lowest of his career. Going into his 13th NFL season, time may be catching up with Kelce, but let's still take a look and see what he's averaged statistically over his career. The future Hall of Famer has been a top-tier fantasy tight end since his second season in the league, all the way back in 2014. Not counting his rookie season, he's averaged 91 receptions, 1,186 yards, and 7 touchdowns per season. although last season was his second straight with some statistical regression. The question you'll have to ask yourself come draft time is, has Kelce seen the last of that elite level production he's given over his career? If so, he can still be a solid fantasy option for your team as you saw last season with his tight end 5 finish. You'll just need to adjust where you're picking him in your drafts. Number 6, David Njoku. Coming off his best season in 2023, there was a lot of expectations for Njoku in 2024. But he missed 6 games with various injuries, causing his numbers to take a dip a bit, ultimately finishing with 64 catches for 505 yards and 5 touchdowns, ranking as tight end 11 in fantasy. He did have a target share of 21.5%, which was 5th best among tight ends, and that number could be even higher in 2025 with the lack of proven targets on the Browns. But let's take a look and see what his historical stats have looked like for fantasy GMs. In the seasons he's played in at least 14 games, he's given fantasy GMs 58 catches, 656 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The issue is Njoku's dealt with a lot of injuries since being drafted out of the U back in 2017. He's only played in a full season 4 times during his 8-year career, which makes it hard to pin down exactly what you'll get from him on a yearly basis. Your best glimpse at what Njoku can do when he's healthy was his 2023 season when he pulled in 81 catches for 882 yards and 6 touchdowns, off of 123 targets. There's no denying that he has the talent to be one of the top tight ends in the league. And as long as he can stay healthy for a full season, he has a good chance to produce for your fantasy team. Number 5, TJ Hockenson. After tearing his ACL and MCL to end his 2023 season, Hockenson started the 2024 season on IR, and he was initially expected to miss the entire year before surprising and being activated in Week 9. He ultimately finished with 41 catches for 455 yards and 0 touchdowns. Despite not finding the end zone, he did have 5 top 15 fantasy scoring weeks, 2 of which were top 5 finishes. Now, Hockenson's been a really good player since coming into the league, but let's see what he's brought your fantasy team. Alright, if we take out his rookie season where he was still figuring things out in Detroit, Hockenson has averaged 70 receptions, 727 yards, and 4 touchdowns per season. Those averages did take a hit, missing a few games to end 2023 and half of the 2024 season. And with the full offseason under his belt not rehabbing, I'd expect those numbers to get back closer to what we've seen from Hockenson prior to the injury. Number 4, Sam LaPorta. Expected of LaPorta after his ridiculous rookie season that saw him finish as tight end 1. And while he did have a good year, finishing with 60 catches for 726 yards and a very respectable 7 touchdowns, finishing as tight end 8, overall his numbers were down across the board. But his 2-year stats have been ridiculous, so let's check them out. Yes, his numbers took a dip last season. But despite that, Sam LaPorta has been an excellent addition to your fantasy roster over his 2 years in the league, averaging 73 catches, 808 yards, and 8 touchdowns per season. As I mentioned, he finished his rookie season as tight end 1. And despite not having the same impact last year, he still finished the season as tight end 8. And the fact that he's in one of the NFL's top offenses is a great reason to think his stats can get back closer to what we saw during his rookie season. But even if they don't, you're still getting top 10 production from LaPorta. Number 3, George Kittle. Kittle posted the second best yardage of his career last season, with 1,106 yards on 78 receptions to go along with 8 touchdowns. He also posted the best catch percentage of his career with 83%, and best yards per target of his career at 11.8 yards per target. Now let's check out the consistent fantasy option Kittle's been since coming into the league. Last year, Kittle was going into his 8th season, and he's been an incredibly consistent fantasy tight end since taking over as the starter in San Francisco in 2018, finishing no lower than tight end 5 during that time, except for 2020 when he missed 8 games. During that time, he's given fantasy GMs an average of 90 catches for 1,039 yards and 7 touchdowns per season. And with Deebo Samuel now in Washington and his targets up for grabs, there's no reason to think that Kittle can't continue to finish as a top 5 fantasy tight end this season. Number 2, Trey McBride. McBride's gotten better in each of his 3 years in the league, finishing last season with 111 catches for 1,146 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those 111 catches were good enough for 4th in the league. And he also commanded a ridiculous target share percentage of 29% last season, good enough for 6th in the league, and the only tight end to finish higher than 24th in that category. Now let's take a look and see what McBride's brought to your fantasy team over the last couple years. Taking out his rookie season, where he was still playing behind Zach Ertz, McBride has given fantasy GMs something to smile about the last 2 seasons, averaging 96 receptions, 986 yards, and 2 touchdowns per year. He finished in the top 10 weekly scoring 12 times last season, and 9 of those weeks were in the top 5. And he really came on towards the end of the season, finishing in the top 5 scoring 6 of the final 7 weeks. Those target and reception numbers are hard to replicate from the tight end position yearly. But even if he sees a slight regression in those categories, if he can get in the end zone a few more times next season, he could still end up finishing in the overall top 25 again. Number 1, Brock Bowers. It's going to be very hard to have a better rookie season at the tight end position than Brock Bowers had in 2024. He pulled in 112 passes for 1,194 yards and 5 touchdowns. He finished in the top 5 scorers 8 times last season. And although he doesn't have enough receptions to qualify just yet, his 73.2 catch percentage would rank 4th all time in the NFL. Now let's take a deeper look at Bowers from last season. Bowers' 112 receptions ranked 3rd in the league last season, and although he received the 5th most targets with 153, he surprisingly wasn't even ranked in the top 25 in the league for target share percentage, coming into 27th with 24.8%. And the addition of first-round pick Ashton Jeanty should only help take some heat off him this year. And it wouldn't be crazy to think his follow-up season could be as good or better, considering Bowers will have much better quarterback play this season, with the Raiders trading for Jonnu Smith during the offseason from Seattle. I think Bowers is a lock to finish in the top 3 scoring tight ends this year, and why I have him as the number 1 ranked player in my way too early 2025 fantasy tight end rankings. He's someone you should be doing whatever you can to snag during your fantasy drafts this season. All right, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you so much again for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out when any new videos get dropped. And as always, please check out the next episode, and let's keep getting ready to dominate those fantasy leagues together. Let's go!